Please welcome to present our final award of the evening, President of the October 30 Foundation, Evegenia Kara-Murza.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I want to thank the wonderful Manatos family and the OXI Foundation for trusting me with presenting this year's Courage Award for courageous defense of democratic values and human rights. In August 1968, 7 people went into Moscow's Red Square to protest against the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia. 7 people in the entire Soviet Union that comprised 15 countries. Did they hope their act would change the regime in the country? Hardly. But you see, as Soviet tanks rolled into Czechoslovakia to crush the Prague Spring, the Kremlin put up enormous propaganda efforts to claim nationwide support for its action. All across the USSR, trade unions, workers' collectives, academic institutes wrote letters of approval. Soviet newspapers reported that support for the invasion was unanimous. And then there were these 7. In her interview for my husband Vladimir Kara-Murza's documentary about Soviet dissidents, one of those 7, Natalia Gorbanevskaya, said, "A nation minus 1 person is no longer an entire nation. A nation minus me is not an entire nation. A nation minus 10, 100, 1,000 people is not an entire nation." So they could no longer claim that there was a nationwide approval in the Soviet Union for the invasion of Czechoslovakia, end of quote. This was the main outcome of that silent demonstration that didn't last even 5 minutes before its participants were beaten up and herded away. A silent demonstration of protest that ended up in lengthy prison sentences for 5 of them and in forced psychiatric treatment, years of forced psychiatric treatment for 2 of them, including Gorbanevskaya herself, because anyone contradicting the state narrative was then and is being again portrayed as either a criminal or an insane person. And yet they were seen, and their bravery was recognized because later a Prague newspaper, Literarne Listy, wrote, "There are now at least 7 reasons for which we will never be able to hate the Russian people." I am deeply grateful to the OXI Foundation for honoring 2 such clear and honest voices today. The voices that break through the madness and horror of Putin's propaganda about the Russian state's aggression against our closest neighbor. The voices that say, "Not in my name." Alexei Gorinov, a deputy at Moscow's Krasnoselsky District Council and trained lawyer, has for a long time been known in Moscow as a human rights activist and public defender, showing up to police stations and courtrooms to offer his services on days when the Russian authorities carried out mass arrests. In July 2022, Alexei became the first person to receive a 7-year prison sentence for spreading, as the Russian government calls it, knowingly false information about the Russian army. His crime was a statement that he made during a meeting of the Krasnoselsky District Council in which he unequivocally denounced the Russian aggression and said it was inappropriate to hold a local children's art contest and dance recital while kids in Ukraine were dying daily. Needless to say, there was not one single false word in what he said. Maria Ponomarenko, a journalist and activist from Barnaul in Western Siberia, continued telling the truth in the state, in a country ruled by propaganda. She was detained in April of 2022 and a year later sentenced to 6 years in prison for a post on Telegram condemning the Russian army's bombing of the drama theater in Mariupol that resulted in hundreds of civilian deaths. What is courage? Courage that pushed Alexei, Maria, and thousands of my fellow citizens to speak out despite the obvious risks of persecution and imprisonment. In the words of President Roosevelt, courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the assessment that something else is more important than fear. But the simple act of rejecting silent complicity and telling the truth, regardless of consequences, Alexei and Maria demonstrated a strong and clear-cut example of civic courage in the face of an all-powerful repressive state. They have shown us yet again that moral courage can be stronger than military might. I am deeply honored to present the 2024 OXI Courage Award to Alexei Gorinov and Maria Ponomarenko, and it is my distinct pleasure to call to this stage my husband's and my colleague and brother-in-arms, prominent Russian opposition politician and former political prisoner, Ilya Yashin, to accept the award on behalf of Alexei and Maria. But first, please watch this video.